Today, we bring you heartbreaking news about one of the most beloved spiritual leaders of our time, Dr. Tony Evans. At 75 years old, the iconic pastor of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Dallas, Texas, is now facing one of the hardest chapters of his life. And the source of this news? His own wife, who stepped forward and confirmed what many had quietly feared. Her words didn't just confirm a personal struggle, they sent shockwaves through the global Christian community. Tony Evans isn't just another preacher. He's a voice that has carried through generations. His name is synonymous with faith, leadership, and unwavering truth. For millions of people around the world, he's been the steady voice on the radio, the powerful presence behind the pulpit, and the man who made the Bible feel personal and alive. His impact has crossed boundaries, not just of race and geography, but of denominations, generations, and cultures. And now, as his wife shares the truth of what's really going on behind the scenes, it feels like the world has paused, holding its breath, listening closely, and praying harder than ever before. For decades, Pastor Evans has led a ministry that began in humble beginnings and grew into one of the most influential movements in modern Christianity. Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, once a small gathering, now houses over 10,000 members. His radio show, The Alternative, is broadcast in more than 130 countries. His books sit on shelves in homes, churches, and seminaries across the globe. And his voice, powerful, steady, full of wisdom, has carried people through some of the darkest nights of their lives. But no matter how far his voice reached, no matter how many souls he touched, Tony Evans was never walking alone. His late wife, Lois Evans, was not only his partner in marriage but in ministry. She was a teacher, a leader, a counselor, and a symbol of grace. When she passed away in 2019 after a courageous battle with cancer, the loss wasn't just personal, it was collective. The Christian world mourned. And yet, even in grief, Pastor Evans stood before his congregation and delivered one of the most vulnerable sermons of his career, proclaiming God's faithfulness through the pain. Now, years later, as his wife confirms the latest sad news, that same vulnerability returns. But this time, the subject of prayer is him. The statement she released was short, but the weight of it was undeniable. She confirmed that Pastor Evans is now navigating a deeply challenging season in his life, a season marked by physical weariness, emotional fatigue, and spiritual strain after decades of non-stop ministry. She didn't go into graphic detail, and she didn't need to. Her words spoke volumes. It was a quiet cry for help, a call for compassion, and a reminder that even spiritual giants are still human. For years, Tony Evans has given every ounce of himself to others, preparing sermons, counseling broken families, writing books, traveling, mentoring pastors, comforting the grieving, lifting up the hopeless. And through it all, his strength seemed endless. But now, the reality is setting in. The toll of this calling, this lifelong pouring out, is becoming too much to bear alone. His wife's tone wasn't just informative. It was emotional. It was raw. She opened a window into their world and asked the community to step inside, not with judgment or pity, but with prayer, love, and support. She reminded everyone that behind the platform is a man, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a soul in need of rest. And that's when the world responded. Within hours of her statement, social media exploded. Hashtags with Tony Evans's name began trending. Fans, pastors, gospel singers, authors, athletes, all sharing how this man's words had shaped their lives. People posted sermon clips that got them through depression, book quotes that saved their marriages, radio messages that made them believe again. It was more than sympathy. It was a global testimony. One that proved Pastor Evans's reach wasn't limited to the pulpit, it had pierced hearts. But the most emotional response came from his home church in Dallas. Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, the community he built from the ground up, came together in a way few churches ever do. When the announcement was shared during a Sunday service, the atmosphere shifted. Heads bowed. Tears fell. Elders walked to the front and prayed over the Evans family with voices cracking and hands trembling. It wasn't just about honoring a leader. It was about loving a man who had walked with them through births, deaths, divorces, breakthroughs, and breakdowns. And now, as he faces his own storm, they're determined to walk with him. From that moment, the church mobilized. Volunteers stepped up to handle responsibilities. Prayer teams formed. Fasting circles began. The very teachings Pastor Evans had poured into them for decades, teachings about community, compassion, and bearing one another's burdens, were suddenly being lived out in real time. And this movement didn't stop at the church doors. Pastors across the nation paused their sermons to pray for Tony Evans. Entire services were dedicated to lifting him up. Ministries of all denominations came together in unity. People who had never met the man suddenly felt connected, because his story, his strength, and now his struggle, had touched their spirit. But perhaps the most powerful part of this moment is the mirror it holds up to all of us. It asks us to reflect. How often do we see our pastors, our spiritual leaders, our mentors, as unshakable? How often do we forget that behind every message of strength is someone fighting battles we don't see? Tony Evans's wife didn't just confirm a sad truth. She issued a challenge to remember that even leaders bleed. Even giants grow weary. And even those who carry others need to be carried sometimes, too. This moment also raises bigger questions. What happens next? Will Pastor Evans step back from preaching? Will he take a sabbatical? What does this mean for the future of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship? And while those questions don't have clear answers yet, one thing is undeniable: the legacy is already set. Tony Evans's impact cannot be undone. His words have built lives. His teachings have restored families. His presence has shaped generations. Whether or not he ever stands behind a pulpit again, his influence will continue through his children, his congregation, his books, his broadcast, and most importantly, through the millions of hearts he has already changed. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. True strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing long enough to lift others up, and humbly sitting down when it's time to heal. As the Christian community now lifts up one of its most faithful leaders, the story of Tony Evans enters a new chapter. One not marked by his voice booming from the pulpit, but by the quiet power of vulnerability. One that reminds us that rest is holy. That weakness isn't failure. And that sometimes the greatest testimony is letting others carry you for a while. So wherever you are, whether you're a longtime follower or just hearing his name for the first time, take a moment to reflect. To pray. To thank God for leaders like Tony Evans. Because even legends need grace.